Before we get to your scheduled video, please remember that likes and comments tell YouTube to promote our work to other people, and subscribing to the channel tells you when something new drops. You can also head to the link tree in the description to peruse my books, join us on Discord, or support us on Patreon. You can get episodes of Journey of Wrestling and Violent Profiles early, as well as a load of other treats. Even just $1 a month earns you a name drop for being cool. Thanks for listening, and enjoy the show. Greetings and salutations, fellow denizens of Faerun. Farron?
Swamp.
It is I, Eric J. Chucci, joined as always by Swamp. That is the boy, of course. This is the Two Nerds Podcast. Before we get into talking about Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves, we'd like to talk about who's cool.
The guy from Ohio.
Yes.
Passion Killer 711.
Agreed.
And one more, I think.
Yes, I believe his name is Rob.
Interesting, that.
Interesting. But yeah, there's a movie we saw. It was pretty good. The end.
God, I wish we still had an outro song. That joke is much funnier if you can cut to the outro.
I do a little static fuzz.
Oh, good.
But I'm not going to do that. This is, I don't want to damn the movie with faint praise, so I'm trying to pick my words very carefully.
This was a very fun movie.
It was a very fun movie. I don't know how much we have to wax philosophical about it.
I don't know that there was a lot to wax philosophical about.
Yeah,
it was a movie that gives you what you paid to see. If you don't play Dungeons and Dragons, and you're not super big on role-playing games, how are you here? Presumably Journey of Wrestling.
Maybe Violent Profiles.
Maybe. So, either of those cases, this is a fun fantasy movie that doesn't take itself super seriously, still delivers a nice, heartfelt story, and is filled with a bunch of fun actors clearly having a great time. If you like Dungeons and Dragons, or tabletop role-playing games in general, I understand how you're here. Thank you for being here.
Especially because we haven't done tabletop role-playing content in so long.
Yeah, so it's just that you're still here is really also surprising. I don't know who this channel's for. Us, really.
It's for nerds. It says it right on the thing.
That's fair. This is a D&D campaign. Just is. It's like an enclosed D&D adventure. It has... So, it's a bit of a tangent, but a thing we say about the first Doctor Strange movie is that it doesn't quite fit in the MCU because it doesn't have the vibe. It doesn't have the je ne sais quoi, that indefinable something that makes a proper MCU movie. This has the vibe of a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. They got the assignment. It's not just a fantasy movie, it's a D&D movie, and I like that. And not just because it's in a D&D setting, they get the spirit.
Yeah, I mean, the branding is all over the place, and, of course it is. But it's more that how things are allowed to be silly without it breaking the overall tension of the story, how no one shuts up in the best way.
How even small, little, seemingly unimportant things that you definitely wouldn't see the characters comment on in other movies, they take the time to make bits about here because that's what D&D players do. They make bits.
Yeah, they really nailed the banter.
Yeah,
the table talk, as it were.
Yeah, and the general way D&D adventures tend to build upon themselves. I really like that. And it's in a D&D setting as well. Faerun, there's 9 different ways to pronounce that. None of them are right, none of them are wrong. It's about what's in your heart. But
spiders.
Well, there we go. We pronounced it spiders in the Two Nerds household, I guess. So in the world of spiders, I'm actually not a huge fan of any of the default D&D settings. I only recently DM'd my second ever campaign in an already established D&D setting.
I think it's because, if I may speculate, you came into those settings like the opposite way from most people.
Explain.
Well,
because I don't know how most people do it.
Usually people are brought in without pretense. Like, your first D&D campaign is set in Dragonlance or whatever. and that's not the case for you.
No, I cut my teeth homebrew. Like, it was homebrew settings all the way up. Until relatively late in my D&D career. And notably, other campaign things like Dark Sun I've DM'd a Dark Sun campaign. I've recently started a campaign, like we had our first session in Ravnica, from like recent Magic the Gathering add-ins to D&D. But I don't actually like Faerun.
Whereas, ironically, my first big campaign was in the Forgotten Realms.
And I like this. Despite not being a huge fan of the setting, they really sold it to me. I like it better here than I have in anything else I've absorbed it from.
I think the other problem with that, potentially, is the way it's delivered. So, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but those settings you have picked up from, like, reading whole cloth descriptions of the setting.
That and like video games set in like Waterdeep or whatever.
And I don't think those do a great job of...
Oh, and Drist.
I don't think those do a great job of like introducing you to all the interesting things that could be in this world the way a campaign does. It's just kind of like, here are some names of cool cities, trust me, this place is great.
Whereas this was, it introduced this stuff, reintroduced, because I tried to go in with as fresh a mindset as I could. It reintroduced this stuff to me in a way that felt really cool and good.
Yeah, this is definitely not the part of Faerun that I did stuff in. We were off in the sticks.
Well, there you go.
I never touched the Sword Coast, if you can believe that. But it was nice to see. It kind of was like running into an old friend and seeing they're doing well.
Like, oh man, look at them. They got a whole thing going on.
Yeah,
look at them.
yeah, good for them.
We don't talk much anymore, but I'm really happy for them.
Yeah. Really, the shining star for me in this film was the characters. Although getting to see those iconic D&D monsters and several iconic D&D spells was really exciting too.
Yeah, I mean, the characters really, like any good D&D campaign, it's about the PCs. The plot is definitely, the DM's plot should always be secondary to the player characters. And that service is here. It's one of the reasons it feels like a D&D campaign, because the characters are center stage. And that's really in service to the movie, because all the actors are having just the most fantastic time.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Justice Smith. I've liked everything I've seen him in.
That was Simon?
Yes, that was Simon.
Fucking, yeah, pretty much same. I don't know that he's ever done anything I dislike.
Michelle Rodriguez from way back.
Yeah, I'm old school on the side of Michelle Rodriguez. She has a type, she likes that type, she knows who she is, and she fucking goes forward with that. And she does a great job. She has like some really heartfelt moments in this, which I really enjoy, because she doesn't get those a lot.
No.
She's a good actress, so she deserves them.
That was a nice thing that I enjoyed. She wasn't just being Michelle Rodriguez. It was kind of like when you're playing D&D with somebody who's kind of new to the game, but where they put on like a little bit of an accent or change their voice just slightly to get into character. And I really felt that from her, and that helped bring out that this is a game kind of mentality.
I could see this as a character. I could see, was it Ugla?
Holga?
Holga, thank you. I never remembered her name. I could see Holga as a character Michelle Rodriguez is playing in D&D.
Yeah. It's hard to pick what to point out and talk about.
You know what? That can be the end of the spoiler-free section of the review, I feel.
Okay.
Let's go into spoilers. Let's run down the cast and talk about a couple different things, because it's also partially a D&D mechanics podcast. We've covered it a lot. So why don't we talk about both the characters and what we liked about them, the actor, blah blah blah, and also talk about like how they fit, how they like serve mechanically in D&D, like what they are, how well that was portrayed, that sort of thing.
For the most part, god awful. We spent a good half hour as we ate Long John Silver's. Discussing what classes we thought everyone was, and we were wrong on most of them because nobody cast a frickin' spell. Except for the sorcerer. The
sorcerer cast spells. I feel like he was a interesting sorcerer archetype. Justice Smith's character, Simon, right?
Yes.
I asked that like 5 seconds ago, but the names in this movie just did not stick in my head. I'm old now. But he has a good character arc. That is definitely something you could easily do with a sorcerer in campaign. Just not use any of your higher level spell slots until you reached your narrative read.
Well, and
but,
he
man,
used
that sure
stuff.
Would make you feel like kind of alone at the table.
It is kind of hard to tell exactly what level these guys are at because, Simon's using telekinesis, which is a decently high-level spell. Bigby's hand. Those are decently high-level spells. But he doesn't splash out a whole lot. Doric, the druid, is wild shaping every 4 seconds.
Doric has Doric, the little tiefling druid over in the corner.
That one's tiefling. It's German.
Sure. She must have some variant class feature that lets her use spell slots as wild shapes, because that's all she did. She did not do spells, she just did wild shape. Which is fine, because there's a very good argument to make that wild shape is what you play a druid for. So they probably should bend more towards wild shape and less towards full spellcaster.
Well, and I'd like to get this right out in front. I don't think anybody along the process of making this movie was like, this needs to be game.
Oh god, no, they clearly did not give a shit. And that's correct.
Yeah.
You should not give a shit.
Serve the plot before you serve the mechanics of the game you're basing the plot on.
I love Vancian spellcasting as a structure for D&D. I never in my whole life will ever give a shit if nobody in a Hollywood movie ever talks about a spell slot. That doesn't need to be a thing anyone needs to talk about.
Unless they're making a Hollywood movie out of the Jack Vance novels.
Yeah, of course. I'm in the context of D&D.
Right, yeah.
Not the Dying Earth series.
Right.
But for D&D, it's a structure that's there to balance combat encounters. I try and work it in narratively whenever I can, because it's a part of the world when you're at the table. But for the purposes of a movie, it certainly doesn't need to be. This is just a fun thought exercise.
Sure. I will say that I'm kind of glad they didn't do that, because when the villainess of the film said, "We have a wild shape among us," I could see the TM falling slowly after the word wild shape.
Wild shape! Dun-dun!
Yeah. Pick up a copy of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition at your local bookseller.
Not one D&D anymore.
Who knows what it is. 5 D&Ds. I appreciate that they wedged Elminster into the plot.
It's a Forgotten Realms thing. It's Faerun. Yeah.
Yeah.
That asshole sticks his nose in everyone's business at all times.
And it's true to the setting. Like, if you're running a game in Faerun, you've got to wedge him in somewhere.
If you go to a Lynyrd Skynyrd concert, they had best play Freebird.
This is a little bit more like they're trying to play a different song, but it keeps coming out as Freebird.
You don't go to the Forgotten Realms for not Elminster.
Right. But so that's kind of on Simon. His spellcasting's a little all over the place. I like the way wild magic was portrayed here.
Where it's his little wheel that he spins.
Yeah, he seems to be trying to tap into greater power, and sometimes it doesn't go so well.
Or it doesn't go well in a way he expects it to go. That's a good interpretation. Honestly, it looks more interesting than the wild magic mechanics in 5e. So maybe give us a variant class for all these guys just to see what they are. That'd be fun.
I'm sure when
that's good content, Wizards. You could publish that book, make money off that.
I'm sure when they drop the new D&D, that'll wild magic sorcerer will be better.
Hopefully. I feel like Holga did great. That was just a barbarian.
I thought she might be a fighter because they took so much time to show her using a bunch of different weapons
and tactics and stuff. But,
yeah,
I mean, barbarians.
And she never really got that mad.
No,
she was pretty chill.
She seems like the kind of barbarian whose rage isn't necessarily of the grog strong jaw mode.
Yeah.
It's not like a shrieking roar. It's more just like, all right, well, now you've pissed me off.
I really liked her though. She was probably my favorite character.
I don't. Yeah, it's the same. She was great.
It was mentioned by a friend of ours, but I think this might be the most lovable Chris Pine has ever been in a film.
Yeah, this is certainly, and I have liked him in several roles. This is the most I've ever liked Chris Pine in anything he's ever done, and he is nearly objectively useless in this plot.
This bard never casts a single spell, never gives out maybe 2 inspirations.
He's clearly not a spellcaster. He's like a variant rogue or something. Or if he is a bard, like mechanic.
It says bard.
He's a bard professionally. He plays a musical instrument.
Sure.
But if he is a bard, it's like some variant bard where, like, I could do this as a variant bard.
Sure.
Where, like, you are a mastermind. You make plans, and if someone is following your plan, you can give them a bardic inspiration die for following your plan. And thus, that explains why they do so well, because they're following his plan. He's a planner. That's pretty easy to fit in. It would have to be some sort of house rule, but you could easily fit that in. It's more that he casts just 0 spells.
Yeah. He doesn't even hit that much.
He gives a couple Elkabongs with that incredibly resilient loot.
Yes.
But that's, again, we're saying this is a thought experiment because this movie was fun and good, but it mostly was like fun, good, and tropey. There's not a whole lot to talk about, so this is just...
Yeah, this isn't new ground. They didn't break anything crazy out. I would like to say that before I saw this movie, I never really gave a shit about the Harpers, thought they were a stupid, boring faction, and that hasn't changed.
I agree.
I mean, like, it seems cool on paper. Oh, yeah, these, like, do-gooder spies.
It's... I mean, the movie does a great job of really painting how that's not a great idea.
Sure.
Like, if you have a group of people who have a very stressful job that requires a lot of danger and puts them in the path for a lot of corruption, you don't underpay them. Because people gotta eat. Bills gotta get paid. You gotta make a good life for your family. I do good and ask nothing in return is a great thing to do when you're 22 and you don't have any responsibilities. When you have a kid and a wife who rely on you, someone has to buy the food, man. I to be clear, I fully am on Edgin's side. This is a spoiler, he engaged in some light corruption, just a little, as a treat corruption to make sure his family had a good life, and it ended up ruining his life, and that sucks. That's how the cookie crumbles sometimes, but I fully don't believe he did anything wrong.
I feel like the Harpers maybe should splash out. Like, someone's got to be paying them to do this stuff.
They got fancy robes and books and shit. You have money somewhere. You should be paying your operatives a wage that they can live on. Because otherwise they're going to have to find some other way to live.
Yep. Moving on, I am not going to try to pronounce this actor's name. It's very French. Zenk Yendar, the Paladin.
The DMPC.
Yes. I wasn't fully aware of that until you pointed it out, but absolutely accurate. Spoiler-free version of this because it deserves to be seen, right down to him walking off after he was done helping the party. Just
into the distance.
It's perfect.
He's clearly a higher level than them. He's better. He's cooler. He does more cool shit. He's together. He's not comedic, except in like a straight man way.
He also has a lot of lore dump, and then they start asking questions that are like, you don't need to know this right now. So he gets very, nope, that's the end of my NPC knowledge.
I have no greeting. And I love that. That's one of the things, again, that makes it feel like a D&D campaign, is this just fucking random DMPC who helps you through like a little mini adventure and then fucks off when it comes important combat time, because, well, you guys aren't going to get that. You're not getting that buff.
He was a cool character.
Yeah, really cool. Intentionally so.
And as we mentioned earlier, Doric, Sophia Lillis, Tiefling Druid. I thought she was kind of cool. You could have gone very typical with a Druid.
I like that she was a Tiefling.
Mm-hmm.
She's well acted. Sophia Lillis does a great job. This character was thin. I don't have much to really criticize about this movie. Many of the characters are not like super deep. It's a romp of a movie. This character honestly was a little thin for me.
She was very useful though.
Yes, she was very useful, very cool, did a lot of cool shit.
And I think that's kind of good because you've got, 5 maybe 6 other characters taking up a lot of screen space and screen time with their personalities. She took up more space with action.
And you know what? That's fair. That's fair. Not everyone has to have like 9 pages of backstory.
No. And I think what was there was there. It was just very subtle and understated. I would agree with that. She was a little on the thin side. But I liked her.
The actress certainly did great with the material she was given.
And I liked her sling.
I like how hilariously effective it was.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't suck. It by all rights should have, but it didn't.
Well, she was probably using the magic stone spell on her stones.
Yeah, sure.
So maybe she actually did cast a spell and we just weren't thinking about it.
Well, it's very nature magic-y.
Yeah. Mostly she just turned into an owl bear and wrecked shop.
Or any other number of animals. Just, who gives a shit?
The action sequences, whether they were fights or like chases or whatever, they were very well choreographed in this film. Really good camera work, good use of your special effects and stuff.
Great use of iconic D&D spells.
That too, yeah. And like, as we said before, creatures. I love Displacer Beasts. It was good to see a gelatinous cube. The little tiny rust monsters were a nice add-on.
I loved seeing them. They made me go, yeah, rust monsters, run.
Nah, they were just bitty guys. And then we come to the secondary cast, I guess. Hugh Grant as Forge Fitzwilliam.
A+. Just excellent. Forge Fitzwilliam, this is actually a great example of like bringing you guys into my table. This is absolutely a villain that I would make in one of my campaigns. Like, Forge Fitzwilliam is delicious. This is excellent villainry right here. Just that perfect combination of ruthless, skeevy, and like completely physically ineffectual that makes a really good, like, foppish noble villain.
There was a certain degree of casual behavior to him that made him seem less like a cackling evildoer and more just like a dick you know at work.
Yeah, just an asshole.
Yeah. I thought he was pretty good. I wasn't quite as enamored with him as you were, but you know, I didn't make him.
This isn't a D&D villain you would do.
Not necessarily. No, I don't think I have the. What is it the children say? The riz to pull it off. I say children. It's this man. This man next to me. He says that all the time.
I try and use modern day slang as that keeps advancing, both to annoy people and because I find it charming most of the time.
Beyond that, we had Chloe Coleman as Kira, Edgin's daughter. She did fine.
Yep, that was a perfectly serviceable role. That character also wasn't terribly deep, but she's not a member of the party.
No,
she's an NPC.
Yeah. And then Daisy Head, I'm going to assume, could be Heed, as Sophina, a Red Wizard of Thay. In this movie, I learned what the Red Wizards are.
Never knew before, huh?
No, I just never ran into one.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't use one. But, yeah. I mean, she's did a cool spooky bad guy. Spooky bad guy, Mick Evilton, who has one overriding principle, the bad, do bad whenever possible.
I mean, I think she had a pretty clear and consistent drive.
Yeah, oh sure, her motivations are understandable. Yeah. They're just...
And she's a pretty stock fantasy villain, I think.
Exactly, yeah. Yes. Stock fantasy villain. Not poorly done, just not a lot of there.
And I can kind of make that criticism for maybe the first half hour-ish of this movie. It started a little slow, it started a little thin, it was a little, okay.
But then the party gets together and the magic comes alive.
Yeah. And it's pretty good during that time. It just... Nothing about this was mind-blowing. This isn't a movie that I walked away from going, wow! Wow, I gotta see that again. But I wouldn't mind seeing it again, even already.
And I certainly wouldn't mind seeing sequels. I will absolutely go see those.
There is no intention to make any. They're making more D&D series, but they said if they did make a sequel, it would be a lot easier if they could keep the same characters.
Please
you don't have to introduce anybody.
I like these guys.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing more of these characters grow and them having adventures in other parts of the...
It'd be a great way to introduce people to the other parts of your setting. Get them to buy your books.
Yeah. That's really even all my criticism. Like,
Yeah, even my criticism is very milquetoast. It's very mild. This and overall isn't intended to even remotely indicate you shouldn't see the movie. This is a good time. This movie was a good time. I had a lot of fun watching it.
yeah, it didn't change anything about my outlook on life. It didn't open my eyes to any new brilliance.
No, it had a good couple heartfelt moments, and has a good emotional payoff for the main emotional story beat. And in the end, that is mostly all I ask from a movie. Don't make me walk out of seeing you sadder than I went in, and have a consistent emotional story you're telling. There's other stuff I like. It'd be great if the movie made sense, if it didn't look like shit and it was well acted, but it delivers on the shit that is central, the shit that I don't really ever like a movie if it doesn't have. I can like a movie that is goofy looking or kind of nonsensical or, but if a movie leaves me depressed or doesn't have a heart, doesn't have a solid emotional through line to it, well, I'm not really gonna love that movie. At least not at this point in my life.
I mean, yeah, it's hard for me to say. I don't feel like I'm watching enough movies from broad enough corners.
And that's true. I also don't watch that many movies. We have a whole other podcast miniseries about how many movies we straight up do not watch.
Yeah.
So
it's a time thing. It's an attention span thing. The reason I keep going to see movies in the theater is because it's so much easier for me to focus on the movie and appreciate it for what it is if I don't have any other distractions. And in the theater, I don't have any other distractions. I will happily pay $7 to $10 to
have
that.
someone curate that experience.
Yeah. But like, I've in the bent of more serious films, we've covered a bunch on the podcast on Two Nerds Don't Go to the Movies, which you can, I believe there's a playlist for it. If not, I should make one. There's many I find in my own life. I read the plot to Midsummer recently. I was just so curious and had no idea when I would actually sit down and watch it. And man, it sounds interesting, and it definitely sounds like something I would have liked in my late teens and early 20s. Would I like it sitting down to watch it now? I don't know. It's a little grisly, but it's kind of cool. So it's harder for me to say exactly, if I would share your thoughts, your preferences in that sense. But
and I don't even know that I could easily see a movie that proves that wrong. This is just based on what I've enjoyed from movies recently.
Well, and in that sense as well, there's a difference between, I'm so excited to go see the Dungeons and Dragons movie and have a fun afternoon with my friends, and, oh boy, let's go watch a movie about a man's life unraveling. And then think.
Yeah.
Just because it's a good piece of media that might be worth ingesting doesn't mean you're going to get hype.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. Infinity War isn't necessarily a happy movie, but it's got a solid emotional through line.
Sure. I would agree with that as well.
As an example.
And again, I know you've said it a couple times, I've said it a couple times. This was a good film. I'm not...
We just really want to do a podcast on it because we covered D&D stuff and we enjoyed watching it, but I don't really feel the need to go beat by beat through the story.
No.
It's mostly about watching the performances, so you're not gonna get it from that. And I don't really care to go over the plot because it's not important.
I think if this were a series, which we're supposed to be getting a Dragonlance series with Joe Manganiello soonish, I believe if this were a series, we would have more than enough to talk about in the same vein of, say, Critical Role.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this was 2 hours.
There'd be more time. There'd be more time to let the characters breathe, to have interactions. Wrap up from the end from just other stuff from that experience. Saw the new trailer for Into the Spider-Verse. What's it called? The new one? Mm. Whatever the Into the Spider-Verse sequel is.
I'm off most social media.
I don't remember what it's called.
I don't know what
it looks good.
Let us know in the comments what the new Into the Spider-Verse movie is. We don't know how to Google things.
We've lost our hands
Yeah.
It's tragic.
I have to headbutt the keys to stop OBS from recording.
I don't really have... Oh, and before the movie, there was a little speech.
Oh, God, yeah, the speech.
That they had all the main cast. Like, all the people you see on the thumbnail there. All seated, like, in normal human clothes. In their little actor chairs, talking about how you're heroes for coming to the theater. Good job, hero. You came to the theater to watch a movie. You're great. And I could see both the extreme disinterest and the gun pointed at them from just off frame, forcing them to do this. Do not do that. Movie people.
Like,
people who make a movie.
If your cast can do it genuinely and not like they'd really like to get to catering, sure.
But that was, I mean,
there was one person there who seemed kind of into it, and I believe it was Edgin's wife.
Like, just genuinely, don't do that. That was cringe.
in the traditional sense, yes.
That harmed my ability to like the first 5 minutes of this movie because I was recovering from that.
I suppose worth mentioning as well some of the special effects. There were non-humanoid races.
Oh, yes. And almost all of them were these just fucking absurd Harryhausen fucking practical costumes.
I loved them.
That looked goofy as all fuck, and I love them. I love that goofy ass Eric Cockra so much.
Some of the CGI was not the best. I mean, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't like, A+ peak. So I'm glad that we got to see people that looked like they fit into the scene and not, please enjoy this PlayStation 2 character model next to actual human.
This is please enjoy this, wonderful practical effect that, while it looks a little goofy and it's very obviously a costume, looks cool and interesting. Like, a good practical effect can, like, you don't think the Muppets from fucking Labyrinth are real. They're clearly Muppets, but they look cool and interesting. As opposed to a scene from Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Be nice to Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
That's fair.
That was an incredibly well animated movie. Hey man, there's some homework for you.
But like genuinely, like this one's clearly, obviously a cartoon.
Sure, reboot footage alongside humans. When
it's bad, it's bad.
When it's bad, it's bad. This movie was not bad though.